Good morning. Thank you very much for such a nice introduction. And my name is Yasu-Hiko Tohsaku. As we introduced, I am a professor at UC San Diego and director of a language program over there. And today I would like to talk about social networking approach, and where the subtitle is Developing Global Citizens. And today, my talk consists of these contents. First, I would like to discuss this current globalized world in the 21st century. Basically, I would like to discuss the context where social networking approach was created. And then I will talk about the needs for new education, new language teaching education. And with the main part where social networking approach, I would like to discuss what the basic principles of a social networking approach. And then I would like to give very concrete examples how we can implement this social networking approach in our classroom. And I am from San Diego. This is a campus I am teaching. And over there, you can see Mexico. And soon there will be a war between San Diego and Mexico. I hope we're not, but. And this way, you see San Diego. I have been on this campus for 40 years, since my graduate days. And this way, you see San Diego is very science-oriented university, and we have very famous School of Medicine. And I have a couple of good friends who are professors at this medical school. And actually, they are training future doctors. And I am also training language teachers everywhere. And we're training doctors and training language teachers are very similar. And so I enjoy talking with medical professors. Today I don't discuss why they are similar, but anyway, I am really enjoying talking with medical professors at our school. And they are training teachers, so I asked, what kind of training are you doing? And they said, lately, training medical doctors are drastically changing. And I asked why. And they said, currently, more than 80% of surgeries, operations in the United States are done by robots, not human beings. More than 80%. And they said soon 100% of surgeries in the United States will be done by robots. It's amazing. So they said, now we need not teach our medical students how to do surgery. And also, they said, now Google developed a new technology in which we will put, or doctor put a tiny invisible cell called a nanocell or nano element into our blood stream. And this tiny blood nanocell moves around in our blood stream and gather information and send information about our health through Apple Watch, internet, to the hospital. And so basically, doctors need not to gather information directly from our human bodies. Nano cell, tiny cell, will go around our body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and gather information, and through Apple Watch, automatically send the information through internet to the hospitals. So if this nanocell speed slows down, it means there is some kind of problem somewhere. And then that information was sent through internet to the hospital. Hospital where computer says, Mr. Johnson has this problem. Maybe in a couple of days, he will have a stroke or something like that. So before this stroke takes place, the hospital will send an ambulance to Mr. Johnson's house and pick him up and give a treatment. And this will happen, actually happening now. In California, Google already experimenting this technology, and Google would like to put this nanocell into your body, everybody in the United States, and gather information, so-called big data. So you can tell, if you drink beers, like some judge, every day, maybe if you drink 5 bottles of beer every day for 6 years, you will become this kind of I think you will have this kind of problem. Google can tell. And so Google tells you, stop drinking beer. And so Google is experimenting already in California, and quite successful, they said. So I think doctors need not to check each individual patient. Google will do. And so doctor's job is to analyze these data collected by Nanocell, and so do analysis of big data. So my friends at the medical school said, in the future, future doctors need not go to a medical school. Instead, they should go to mathematics department and must study statistics and analysis of data. And so they said medical school has been changing drastically, especially in the area of training future doctors. So I said, oh my gosh, computers and robots will do always the job you guys are doing. So probably we don't need doctors in the future. Doctor's job will disappear, I said. And my friend said, no. Doctor's job remains forever. Human doctors are really needed, at least for 2 jobs. And I asked, what 2 jobs? And they said, one thing is, for example, some people are almost dying and connected to many tubes and kind of veggie type of people. And doctor's job is to decide when we will pull out the tubes, when we will allow people to die. That kind of thing should not be determined by computers or robots. This kind of dignity thing should be decided by human doctors. What is another job doctors should do? They said, give really warm words to patients, consoling patients. And I think even computers or robots can do that now. But anyway, my friend said there are 2 jobs human doctors should do: decide when people should die and give really kind words to patients. So my friend said, now we accept medical students based upon intelligence. Usually those who go to a medical school are really smart people and high IQ and high GRE score. But from now on, we would like to accept students into medical school, those who have a high EQ, emotional IQ. So really, have a sensitivity and emotionally, quite rich. Those kind of people should come to a medical school. The reason that I'm talking about this medical school case is, world is changing. Technology is advanced, and robots and computers will do surgery, and doctors will job. And so there is a changing needs where, what kind of people we need in this world now. There is a changing needs. And so medical school is changing, medical education is changing. Likewise, maybe our language education must change because the world surrounding us has been changing. And so John Dewey, really, I think a notable education specialist, who has said, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. And education, therefore, is a process of living, not a preparation for future living. And also, school reflects all quality of the society, current society. And so, if the world we are living has been changing, our education should change. That's the key point of today's discussion. So I think now we understand, I will talk from now, but the world has been drastically changing in the 21st century. And so we must change our education, and we should reimagine ourselves. It's time to reimagine ourselves. And so we are living in the 21st century, and I think all of you were born in 20th century, I guess. So you already experienced 2 centuries, 20th century and 21st century. Lately, I talked to a high school student and middle school students a lot, and I talked about 20th century, and they don't know. They don't experience 20th century. So I had a hard time to compare 20th century and 21st century, but you can tell 21st century is very different from 20th century. And sometimes 21st century is called a century of globalization, or globalized century. And the definition of globalization is really tough. And there are so many different definitions. Probably most famous one is New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman wrote a book called The World is Flat. And in that book he discussed what's going on in this globalized world. But what we are experiencing now is actually globalization. Let me talk about this number, 50 billion gigabytes. Do you know what is this 50 billion gigabytes? This is the amount of information human beings created since the beginning of history to 2003. So the beginning of history, people stand walking and making a fire. And from that time to 2003, human beings created 50 billion gigabytes of information. Do you believe now human beings in the world create 50 billion gigabytes every minute? Every 1 minute now, human beings in the world creating 50 billion gigabytes of information. So you can tell information, I think increased drastically in this 21st century. Another calculation says the amount of information we create today is 50% of information human beings created from the beginning of history up to yesterday. So the rate of increasing of information is really unbelievable. And that's the world where we are living now. And the reason, probably the main reason that information increased this much is due to social media. Our president send tweets, at least 5 tweets every day. And many of you are using Facebook or other social media. And because of the advancement and development of social media, we can send or we can create information very easily in the 21st century. This never happened in the 20th century. 1980, I was the first group of people in the United States or in the world who got an email address. At that time, I can send email to only 10 people. UC San Diego and UCLA was the first place where people got an email address. Other people didn't have an email system. And so I can send maybe even not the 10, 5 people send an email. And now you send the email almost not every day. And how many email messages do you receive? It's amazing. And also, many of you have Facebook accounts and where you write article in the blog and so on. And so social media contributes to this increase of information. I checked last week. There is one website where you can check how much information is created now, and by tweets, Facebook, and other social media. I checked YouTube. When I checked last week, people upload 360 hours worth of videos in 1 minute in the world. 360 hours worth of video created or uploaded in the world in 1 minute. It's unbelievable. You can find any kind of information on the social media and YouTube. And 400,000 hours. People are watching 400,000 hours worth of videos per minute in the world. And this number is increasing every day. It's really unbelievable in the world where even now, probably 400,000 hours of video someone is watching. And that's how social media is used now. And another important factor or thing is 75% of information, 500 gigabytes, created every minute now is created by individuals, not institutions or schools or government. Only 25% of information created now are created by government, universities, institutions, and so on. 75% are created by individuals like us. That's why in Egypt, revolution happens from Facebook. And in Turkey, when almost the revolution started, government prohibited people from using Facebook and Twitter. And in China, government prohibited using Google, Facebook, probably fearing that people will start a revolution from Facebook or Twitter. So social media has a lot of power, very strong power, to change people, to change opinion, and so on. And so this is what's going on in this globalized world. And so someone said the key word of 21st century is connect. You can connect with people very easily. You can connect with people with whom you couldn't connect so easily in the 20th century. Now you can connect very easily. I have a Twitter account. I'm not using my own name, so you don't know what I'm doing, but I have a Twitter account. And usually I send probably 15 or 20 tweets every day. And as soon as I send my tweet, someone in Europe, I think a guy who is living in Amsterdam, retweets immediately. I have never seen this guy. But I know his name, so I did some research by using Google. And he is a really famous ESL teacher in living in Amsterdam. I have never seen this guy, but he always retweets my tweet. Someday I would like to see him. And so you can connect with people very easily. And I always, remember 20th century, when I was a kid, something happens in Japan. That news where, it takes almost 1 day to reach Brazil, the other side of Earth. But now, if something happens in New York now, immediately people the other side of the world know what happened in New York. So mail bomb was sent to CNN, and immediately people in Brazil or in Japan or in other parts of the world know. And so this is the 21st century. You can connect with people or society or culture or information very easily. So the key word of 21st century is connect. Next to a different number, 20,000 years. Probably you don't know what 20,000 years is, so I will tell you. According to some research, if technology advances at the same rate of 2013 in the 21st century, so 100 years, same rate at 2013, technology advances in 100 years, 21st century, 20,000 years worth of 2013. So, technology advancement or development of technology industries 2013, if we say at the same rate, technology advances the rest of the 21st century, technology advancement is 20,000 years worth of 2013. It's really difficult to imagine, but this means technology advances really quickly, fast. So, for example, I always talk with my wife. My wife is about the same age as mine, but we say, okay, while we are living, we are alive, this will never happen. We talked about this kind of thing 10 years ago. Now, actually, that will never happen thing is happening. Yeah. So I remember I talked with my wife about 10 years ago. While we are alive, probably we won't see flying cars. According to some prediction, we will see flying cars by 2030. Yeah. And it's amazing. And so technology advances really fast. So it is expected that AI, artificial intelligence abilities, will surpass human abilities in 2045. Actually, according to New York Times, this will happen before 2045. AI's ability is getting closer to human abilities, and someday will surpass. And also, according to BBC, that were British broadcasting station, in the future, robots will own companies. Robots will draft write company specification or planning, and start having companies. Problem is, when robot will start company and become the president, they will hire human beings. So there will be days where human beings work for robots. And actually, this is really dangerous. it was a story of a science fiction, robot will control people. But actually, this might happen in the near future. So in Washington, D.C., in the Congress, there is now they are thinking to start writing or making a bill, law, which will limit the power of or abilities of robots and AIs. Otherwise, human beings will be controlled by robots. And somewhere researchers said, now we have about 70 billion people in the world, but we don't have enough food. Actually, we can supply food for 40 billion people, but 30 billion people don't have enough food. And where human beings think, okay, 30 billion people don't have a food, so how we can give this 40 billion people food to 30 billion people? Robot will think, okay, we don't have food for 30 billion people, so if we kill 30 billion people, that's okay. That's the logic of robot or AI, according to this research. So we have to avoid this kind of situation. And I think this is a really serious issue. We will have many situations where we never imagined in the 20th century. For example, easy cases like a driverless car. Already with driverless cars are moving around in California. Google made driverless cars, and they are loaning their driverless cars to employees. And so in California, we made a new law lately. Who should buy insurance for driverless cars? If there is no driver inside a car, who should buy insurance? In California, we made a law. Still, a person who is inside driverless car should buy insurance. But we need not to think about this in the 20th century. But 21st century, because of the appearance of driverless car, we have to think about this. And in the 22nd century, human beings and robots will marry. You might laugh, but this might happen. Do you know there are many dating sites on the internet, like dating sites for Asian people, dating sites for Christian people, dating sites for Hispanic people, and there are many dating sites on the internet. Actually, only one company owns all the dating sites. And so this is just assumption. I go to a dating site. I never, but assume I went to a dating site, and there are many photos of ladies, and I really liked one. So I send an email. I really like your hobbies, and I have the same hobby or something like that. Currently, in the United States, if you write to dating site, more than 30%, close to 40% of responses are written by computers or AIs, not the real human beings. And the interesting thing is, if you write to a dating site and you receive a response from robot, many people fall in love with that person. So, in Japan, where there are many guys who cannot fall in love with real women, but can fall in love with cartoons. And so, in the future, 22nd century, human beings may marry robots. And so we will have Android living together with us. That's the 22nd century. So this kind of thing will happen in the future. And we are losing many of our jobs to robots and computers. Robots and computers take away our jobs. And according to the Department of Labor in the United States, 20th century in the United States where Americans were did 1 or 2 jobs in lifetime. Actually, I am doing only 1 job in my lifetime, teaching at college. I never done any other jobs in my life. And that was a typical 20th century guy. But 21st century already, between year 20 and 38, so 20 years, Americans doing average of 10 to 15 jobs. Economy is bad, so company go broke, and we lose a job. And also now many jobs are taken over by robots and AIs. And so I talked about a driverless car, so in the future, there will be no taxi drivers. All cabs will become driverless. And so in New York, yellow cab, there are many taxi, cab drivers, but they will lose job. Pizza delivery will be done by drones. Already Amazon.com is using drones for deliveries. So delivery jobs will be gone. So if you have average abilities or skills, you won't have job in the future. Robots, AIs, computers will do that job. But I said average skills or average jobs, but pilot's job will disappear about 2050. Computers will fly planes. Air traffic controller's job will be gone. Air traffic control will be done by computers. And also, there was a really famous article a couple of years ago in Wall Street journals. And economy writer at the Wall Street Journal compete with computer in writing articles. New York Stock Exchange send many information to Wall Street journals and everywhere. Based upon that information, very famous economy writer in Wall Street Journal start writing article, newspaper article. Took 7 minutes for him to finish this one article. At the same time, computer started writing article based upon the same information. For computer, it took only 1 minute. 7 minutes and 1 minute. But there is additional story to this. Computer wrote 99 different stories along with this one story together. So computer wrote 100 stories in 1 minute. Human newspaper writer wrote only 1 article in 7 minutes. So he said, I will lose my job in the future. And 2 years ago, there was the Olympics in Brazil. At that time, Washington Post in Washington, D.C., 20% of articles about Olympics are written by computers. Only human beings wrote 80%. So in the future, this ratio will go up. Definitely, computers, robots will write newspaper articles. And so probably newspaper reporters will lose their job. Yeah. And so even if you have specialized skills, we will lose or you will lose your job to computers and robots. Some people say teacher's job will be gone. In the future, robot will teach. I don't believe that. If I have time, I will tell you why. But so we are losing job. And this is CEO of Google. He said by 2030, 80% of our jobs will be done by computers and robots. And I think this is true. We are losing jobs to computers and robots every day. But human beings are very creative. So although there are many disappearing jobs where we are doing, but people are creating new jobs. And so, for example, YouTuber. 10 years ago, YouTube started. At that time, I never kind of imagined there will be a job called YouTubers. And the guy who is making most money out of YouTube or YouTuber jobs makes $7 or $8 million a year. He is living in East Europe. In the United States, where the guy who makes most of the money out of YouTube makes $3 or $4 million. It's unbelievable. Why am I standing here? Maybe I should sit in front of a computer and just upload videos, make $7 or $8 million. So we are creating new jobs. So, some guy, or some woman actually, at Duke University said 6% of jobs that current grade school kids will have after their college graduation do not still exist, create in the future. So we don't know what kind of a job, they will do, still not existing. For example, in Japan, if you ask grade 1 female kids, what would you like to do in the future? I would like to do a cake making, pastry chef, they say. Now a 3D printer makes wedding cakes, actually. So you need not make cakes. 3D printer, if you put a powder and so on, 3D printers will make cakes. And so I think the world is changing drastically. So we are, I think we're living in a really, historical turning point now. And network society led by technology advancement and also really fast changing society. And as I discussed, a really big amount of information is created every minute. And because of that, there is a really severe competition, economic competition with, for example, United States, Japan, and newly developed countries like Vietnam, Myanmar, Bangladesh, and those countries. And according to Trump, we are losing a lot of employment to those countries because of globalization. We can share information with those countries quite easily. And so the same materials, same product, they can produce with cheaper cost. And so we are losing. And also it's really unpredictable future. And so I don't go into the detail, but the 20th century and 21st century are so different. And have you ever heard this word, VUCA World? I have to bite my lower tongue, lower lip. VUCA World. Have you ever heard? VUCA, V-U-C-A, stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. VUCA World. Originally, this word, VUCA World, was created by US military, American military. United States are doing a war in Afghanistan now. And the situation in Afghanistan is really volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. You don't know what's going on or what will happen next. Suicide bomber shows up somewhere and taking care of that, and then next to a suicide bomber shows up. Such situation is called a VUCA World by US military. And then business people, maybe especially in New York, said, without a war, current economic situation, current business world is VUCA world. Uncertain, unpredictable, volatile, competitive, And so now business world people, business people started using VUCA World. And then, those were business people told high schools and universities, you guys should create people who can survive in VUCA world. Otherwise, United States cannot compete with those developing countries. And so now in education, we started using this VUCA world. And VUCA world, 21st century. So we are living in a really hardware society. A couple of years, maybe 5 years ago, there was a book called Average is Over. This is written by Harvard Business School professor. And as I mentioned, now, 21st century, if you have only average level of skills and abilities, it is really difficult to survive in the 21st century. So average is over. And also, average middle class is going away now. And if you look at America or Japan too, middle class people are disappearing. Only poor people are really rich people. And so if you are average people, it's really difficult to survive in the 21st century. In this book, author said, 20th century was like an elevator. So you graduated from high school and start your career, and if you make an effort, your position is going up gradually, and at the end of your career, you reach the top of that escalator, and your pension plan is waiting. So you receive a pension, and you can survive until you die. That was 20th century. Even if your average abilities and skills, if you make effort, you will become somewhat successful, and you can survive and you can live comfortably in the rest of your life. According to this author, this century is over. 21st century is a walking path, moving walking path. Even if you never go up, unlike escalator. And if you make an effort, and if you work hard, not necessarily you will be successful. Your position won't go up. Actually, you will have more failures. You fail more often than being successful. That's 21st century. So compared with 20th century, 21st century is really, really hard to survive, to live. So there are many problems. I said challenges, but actually problems and issues. I said maybe robot will control people, and there will be driverless cars, and we will lose many jobs to driverless cars. And so there are many 21st century challenges. Actually, Japan faces most 21st century challenges in front of other countries. I will talk about this later. But for example, we have energy issues, like we had a nuclear plant, and whether we should stop using a nuclear plant or not. That's a big issue, Japan, and now Germany stopped using a nuclear plant. And so there are many challenges. So people are saying, in order to live or survive in 21st century, this really complex complicated world, we need special skills. And they are called 21st century skills. Famous one is 21st century skills developed or proposed by the Partnership for 21st Century Skills in the United States, maybe some of you already heard. Or another famous one is proposed by OECD, key competencies. And what were 21st century skills? In order to survive 21st century kids should have 21st century skills. 2016, there was a World Economic Forum meeting in Switzerland. In that meeting, World Economic Forum proposed 16 skills in 3 categories. Those were skills we have to impart in school system in the world so that our kids can survive in the 21st century. First category is literacy, reading and writing literacy, math literacy. These were literacies were needed anytime. And science literacy, we don't have sufficient scientists now. So now government is emphasizing STEM education. We really need more scientists because technology advances so fast and human beings cannot catch up. So we have to create more scientists and engineers. That's another reason, foreign language education is not given enough attention because people, look at STEM education only now. And ICT literacy, computer is part of our everyday life, so we have to be able to use computers. Information literacy is very important in this way, age of Trumpism, fake news. And economic and financial literacy, probably social security system will be broken in the future. Not only the United States, but every country in the world. So when you get old, you have to support yourself, not the government. So from a young age, you have to start investing money for your, old days. And so we have to teach how to invest from even grade school. And also we have a connection with people with different cultures, different social background, and social cultural literacy. And also second category is problem-solving abilities. Kids should develop good critical thinking skill and problem-solving skills. We have many problems, so these kids must solve these problems. Creativity and communication skill, this is a good part for us. And also collaboration skill. And I think now we have a lot of different information. One person cannot control all information, and so I think different people, gather different information, and these people get together, work collaboratively, and create new things. So good collaboration skills needed, and character and quality, curiosity. And now our lifespan is going longer and longer, and when probably current college students become old, average lifespan will go over 100 years. And social security system is going broke. And so the tendency in the world now is there is no retirement age. You must work forever because no pension. So you have to work even age 80 or maybe in the future 90. Now I go to a McDonald's and there is old people working. It's amazing. I thought that job is for high school kids. The world America's best first job. It's now America's best last job. And so you have to be curious forever. You have to learn new things. You have to become a lifelong learner. Otherwise, you cannot survive. And also, the best way to
keep your job now is to create your own job. So you will start your own company and you create your own job. That's the best way to keep your job. And grit, University of Pennsylvania person here. Psychology professor, education professor said the most important factor or character student must develop in the United States is now grit, patience. As I mentioned, even if you make an effort, you are not necessarily be successful, but you will have a failure more often. So you have to be patient. And adaptability, everything changes so fast. So you should be really adaptable to these changes. Leadership skill, when you work in a group, you should be able to take a leadership. And also culture and social awareness. We will, see multicultural, multilingual people quite easily now. So you should have a good cultural and social awareness. And so these were 16 skills, qualities. World Economic Forum said these skills should be imparted in public education so that our future kids can survive in the 21st century. And these were, needed skills change from time to time. OECD has been doing some research. 2030, what is the most important skills kids must learn? They did research, and already they concluded. They had a conclusion. The most important quality student must acquire in 2030 is empathy. This is really interesting because computers and robots take over many things, and then human beings should do what only we can do. And probably robots and computers don't have empathy. And so human beings have empathy, and that's where the strengths of human beings, according to OECD. So the best way, the most important way, thing we should teach our kids in 2030 is empathy. So world is changing, so education must change. And now actually in the world, throughout the world, education reform has been going on. Probably university people have nothing to do with this, but K through 12, public education is going through education reform now. The point of this education reform currently going on underway in the world, point is the most important thing education must teach is 21st century skills. Those were 16, factors. That's where the goal, main goal of education, to impart those were 16 skills. And we are teaching, foreign languages. How about the education of foreign languages? And you cannot see here, but subject knowledge and performance skills. So grammar and vocabulary of Spanish, and being able to use Spanish in everyday situation. That's application of knowledge. What about those things in our education? Now in education reform, they are saying through education of grammar and vocabulary and performance skills of language, through as medium of education, you should teach 21st century skills. So they are not ignoring vocabulary and grammar, but through vocabulary, grammar teaching, we should impart 21st century skills. That's the main point of education reform in the world. In Japan, a new curriculum guideline will start next year, 2019, and the point is this one. I was in Taiwan last weekend, and I talked about foreign language education in Taiwan. And in Taiwan, this kind of educational reform is going on. I went to Vietnam in September. Same thing is going on. Teaching 21st century skill is the main goal of education. Maybe college people say, oh, that's a K through 12 education. We college people ignore or don't care. But I think this education reform is really important for us too. I have been involved with foreign language education in the past 40 years. And if we look at really half century of foreign language education, I think good ideas come from bottom. Content-based instruction, immersion type of education, language education, all came from grade school, middle school, and high school. And those were good ideas, always college teachers stop. We don't care. But actually, good ideas, I think we should use. That will improve our foreign language education at college level. Anyway, we have to, the world is changing, so we have to change our education. And through that education reform throughout the world, what's going on in K through 12 language education in the world is this. From education of language, now we're changing to education through language learning. So by teaching foreign languages, students can develop those 21st century skills. So from our foreign language classroom, we produce people who can survive 21st century, of course by using foreign languages. So that's the way education is changing. Foreign language education is changing now. And so we emphasize the functional goals. So by teaching grammar and vocabulary, students can function in the society, but not only simply functioning in the society, but education goals were human development, personal growth, and become a full-fledged citizen. That's where the emphasis of education, foreign language education now. And so from language education as a tool to language education to develop global citizens or citizenship, those who can survive 21st century, and we are faced with many different challenges, hard one. We would like to create people who can solve these problems and improve the society and make this Earth more livable. That's the goal of education reform now. So I said now language education to develop global citizenship, and global citizenship where people use different terminologies. And some people say world citizenship, and CFR use intercultural citizenship and cosmopolitan citizenship. Although many people use different terminologies, but the essence is same. Those who can take advantage of their rights and abilities fully and change your society and make a contribution to the society. That's global citizens. And we would like to create those kind of people out of our classroom. And so now in education field of the United States, they say new curricular goals, 3 curricular goals. First, develop social skills or develop 21st century skills. And second one is understand the value of knowing subject contents. And third one is help students grow as human beings. And the second one, understand the value of knowing subject contents. This is, I think, a very important value. Not a subject per se, but why we have to study Spanish, why we have to study Korean, Chinese. That's a value. That's more important. So in old curriculum, traditional curriculum, goal was study subject matters. But new curriculum, we try to achieve these goals. So I talked about social media, and because of the development of social media, I think the purpose of language use and function of language is changing. So now we develop a connection through information acquisition and exchange, carry out social activities and change societies, and contribute to societies, enhance our life. That's the main purpose of languages now due to the advancement of social media. And so I think new goals of language education is develop competencies to connect with multilingual and multicultural people and develop new societies, improve societies, develop communication and social skills to solve numerous 21st century problems, develop knowledge, skills, and qualities survive in complex global societies. That's why I came up with a new approach to teaching foreign languages, and I called that social networking approach, SNA. And this SNA is originally came from published in this way, 学習の目安 in Japan. And this is teaching or curricular guidelines for Chinese and Korean in high school in Japan. And we are asked by Ministry of Education and Science in Japan to develop new curricular guidelines for teaching Chinese and Korean in high schools in Japan. And were developed by the Japan Forum in Tokyo. This is a non-profit organization. And also we developed for Chinese, Korean, but these guidelines can be applied to the teaching of any languages at any level. That's why I'm here, and I will talk about this social networking approach. In this social networking approach, education philosophy is discovering others, discovering oneself, and making connections. So by studying a foreign language, we can understand, we know other people, other society, other cultures, and usually it's really difficult to understand yourself, but if you know other people, other culture, other society, it's easier for you to understand your own self, your own society, your culture. That's another function of foreign language education. If you know others and yourself, try connect with others. And so this is education philosophy of social networking approach. And the education goals were to promote learners' personal growth and development through the study of languages and cultures, and to cultivate the ability to survive in the 21st century global society. So you can tell this way, reflects the current trend of education reform in the world, developing 21st century skills. And then learning goals to acquire comprehensive communicative abilities. I call this 3x3 plus 3. And probably this is the most important of today's lecture. After we're developing this educational philosophy and educational goals, we thought, what we should teach? What is the teaching goal in foreign language education in order to implement this education philosophy and to achieve these educational goals? What kind of abilities we should impart in the classroom? What kind of materials we should cover in our classroom, we thought. And then we came up with this 3x3 plus 3. So we have to handle, or we have to cover 3 different areas of materials. One is, of course, language and culture. And I added with the global society areas. This is a new one. And also, we have to handle 3 different abilities in the classroom. First one is, I'm sorry about the Japanese, but wakaru means know or understand. We have to know, we have to understand grammar and vocabulary. We have to understand culture. And second one is dekiru. Actually, that means can do. So we can use grammar and vocabulary and handle communicative situations. And in addition, I added tsunagaru. Tsunagaru means connect. As I mentioned, the key word of 21st century is connect. So by using foreign languages, we should connect people, connect with other society, connect with other information, and so on. And that's 3 abilities. And also, in order to enrich and empower foreign language education, we came up with 3 connection areas. I will explain this way a little later. Learners, other subject, and outside the classroom. And so we came up with this way, illustration. And you got a handout, 1-page handout, explaining this way more in detail. 3 by 3 plus 3. So 3 areas: language, culture, global society, wakaru, know, dekiru, do, and tsunagaru, connect, and 3 connection areas. So 3 by 3 plus 3. These were, goal areas of social networking approach. And we should achieve all of these goals through our language education. That's where the claim done by social networking approach. These were framed part we did already, or we are doing already. We are handling vocabulary and grammar, and we are trying to teach so that the student can use language. And also in our language classroom, we are teaching culture, and not only giving cultural knowledge, we are teaching cultural performance, not a performance, but cultural skills where you can use in communication. We are teaching. So these were areas, 4 areas, nothing new to us. New areas is these red frames, tsunagaru, and global society. And now, probably you can tell why I did a global, society. As I mentioned, now the main goal of education reform is to teach 21st century skills. That area actually take care of 21st century skills. And tsunagaru, as I mentioned, 21st century keyword is tsunagaru. And connect, in social networking approach, connect has many different meanings. Connect with other culture, other society, other information, other people, and also inside the classroom, outside the classroom, and also connect with oneself. Establish identity, developing identity. That's the strength of foreign language education. Yeah. And also develop knowledge and skill networks in our brain. And so I thought a couple of people came from Rutgers University today. Oh, yeah. Do you know Professor Richard Miller? Yeah. He is a very famous professor of English language, and his way of teaching English writing is very well received, and many people are using his approach to writing English. Anyway, he is a professor at Rutgers University, and he wrote this book, Writing at the End of the World. In this book, he said, the practice of humanities, foreign language education is also humanities subject too, is not the admiration of greatness or appreciation or depth knowledge of scholarly achievement. It's about the movement between worlds, balancing. It's making connections that count. And he made a really important claim for us. The purpose of language education is making connections that count. Try to connect with other people by using with a target language and develop as a human being and change the society. That's where the main purpose of humanities. Not where, appreciation of famous literature or those kind of things. Again, you have to do that. But through appreciation of great literature, you have to connect. That's where the purpose of humanities, he said. And value of language learning, according to this way, Professor Miller, making connections. Connection not only means individual to individual, but information, items, things, communities, cultures, nations, thoughts, academic, many kind of connections. That's where the purpose of language education. That's what Professor Miller claimed, and I agree. And so I think the strength of our foreign language classroom or education, our instruction is we develop abilities to connect with diversified people. We develop abilities to connect with diversified culture, maybe plural form. And so that's what we can do, or that's the strength of our foreign language education. And abilities to connect actually that table connect part of language, culture, and social global society area. Three connect area together. That abilities connect. Some people use different terminologies. Some people call intercultural communicative competence or critical cultural awareness, intercultural competence. CFR or CFR use intercultural competence in the newly revised edition. And the language education purpose should be, CFR says, to develop intercultural competence. And also this was social society areas. This is new to language education, but I think this consists of really important of foreign language education. Knowing wakaru of social global society area is students should know what's going on in the world right now. It's a really complicated, tough world. They should know. And also they should know in order to survive in this really tough world, what kind of skills they should develop. So, do part, they will develop 21st century skills. Those were 16 skills I mentioned. And also tsunagaru part, using those 21st century skills, their language abilities and cultural abilities, try to change the society, try to contribute to the society, problem solves, critically think, and make this society better. That's where global society, connect with part. And also there are three connection area to enrich and empower our foreign language education. Connection to student interest, desire, attitude, learning style. Basically, this is try to motivate students for language learning. And also connection to content of previously learned materials. If you know national standards, this is the third C, connection. So try to incorporate previously studied contents and contents of other subjects. And also try to connect with outside classroom. This is national standards. Fifth last C, communities. because I was involved with this, so affected by the national standards a lot. And so I think that the most important goal of the language education is this way, global society connection. Students can contribute to societies, change societies, and improve societies by connecting other people. I think that this is the most important goal of foreign language education. So lately, I am expanding this idea more and beyond connect. So connecting with other people and engaging with different societies and outside people information and change yourself and change other people, change societies. That's where the goal of social networking approach. So what the social networking approach is for, I already discussed this, but language education to connect, language education for problem solving, language education for social contribution. And so I'm not teaching, we need not teach a vocabulary or grammar, or we need not teach communicative abilities. We have to teach, but beyond, we have to teach students how to contribute with societies by using these knowledge and abilities. That's where the value of foreign language education. Now as the enrollment of foreign language classrooms in the United States are going down, except Korean and Japanese. Other language enrollment is going down. So we have to add a different value to foreign language education, and the value we could add is this problem solving and social contribution. So this is a new goals of language education, and this is a repetition. So language education for social contribution, create citizens who engage proactively with societies, contribute to them, improve them, and change them. And so language education for human personal growth and human development. This is one goal of a social networking approach. And so we should create a classroom where these things happen. Create changes, make new connections, create new things, create beautiful things. And this is important. Social networking approach, I don't have any kind of suggestion or proposal you should use this method. Teachers must think how to do class activities to achieve these 12 goals. I don't discuss this today, but this is really important. I think teaching is not cognitive activities. If it is or they are cognitive activities, we can develop theory. And we can say, if you use this method, if you follow this theory, you can teach effectively. I think teaching is not cognitive activities, but so-called ontological activities. Each situation is different. Today's classroom is different from yesterday's classroom. What teachers should do is think about each situation and come up with best way to teach, best way to learn. That's teacher's job. So I don't make any specific suggestions, use this way. That's the teacher's job. So this afternoon you will think, what is the best way in my classroom to achieve these 12 goals? And I will give you only one example. And this afternoon, they will give 2 examples. And my example is not so good, but project-based learning, my friend did in Japan. And project-based learning, probably you already know, so I don't go into the detail. But in Japan now, aging society with low birth rate and the population of older people are growing, and because of low birth rate, the population of young people is decreasing. This is a really big problem because, oops. Let me see. Maybe I forgot to add this. But the reason is, in Japan, Tokyo has a lot of population and more people are moving into Tokyo. And rural areas are losing population. And only older people are living in rural areas. This is the main cause of low birth rate, and Japan is losing young people. And so if you go to a rural area, many deserted houses, people are getting old and go into a retirement home. So there are many empty, homes in rural area of Japan, and deserted shopping streets, and no one is shopping, and so all shops are closed. This is a typical scene in rural areas in Japan now. This is a 21st century problem. And actually, not only in Japan, but other countries will experience this. Actually, Korea, Taiwan, and in the future, China will have the same experience. Thank God, the United States will have immigrants coming in, so avoiding this problem. That's why the Japanese government decided to have more immigrants starting next year. And anyway, many will follow. Unused lands are increasing in Japan. So my friend is teaching Japanese in one national university in the rural area of Japan. And this national university is located in a really small city. And almost all people living in that city are old people. Young people all were left Tokyo and Osaka. And so empty house, empty agricultural lands, because people are old to do farming. And so a lot of empty road. So one neighbor of this university donated his empty lot to this Japanese language teacher. And he said to her, "You can use my land as any way you like." So my friend decided to let her Japanese language student to decide how to use this land and develop, to do something with this land. So what she did was, first we gave a driving question. There are empty lot over there. So make good use for community. You will make a decision. So students did all planning and preparation, discuss how to use this land. They did competitions. 5 groups came up with 5 different ideas, and they decided to pick the best idea. And based upon that idea, they developed how to develop this land. Actually, they decided to make a park so that all the people can get together there and talk to each other. And so they decided to develop a garden or park. And they discussed what kind of design they should develop, what kind of flowers they should plant. They make all decisions. Teachers are just advisors. And also they did fundraising in the community. They sell, they sold food of their country and made money and bought flower seeds and so on. And interviewed local people what was their need and why this deserted lands were increased, and they did research and they did a questionnaire and they developed a park, and they had an opening ceremony inviting city mayor and so on. And everything was decided, developed by students. by using Japanese. And at the end, when they did evaluation, whether they did a good job or not, whether their Japanese language ability is developed and so on. So this is a really great way to develop social contribution abilities. And so I don't discuss this way, but by doing this project-based learning, they achieved these 12 goals, all. And according to my friend, before she implemented social networking approach, her classroom was concentrated on these abilities. These were actually, I think, language teaching as a tool. However, once she implemented social networking approach, you need not read everything, but actually students developed 21st century skills while learning Japanese language. And so if you compare these two, so different. And so in summary, language education we should develop is language education to connect with other people, society, thing, and information. And language education to solve problems, language education to contribute to societies. This is the 21st value of language education. So I discussed this language education for human developments. And I think it's time for us to reinvent our foreign language education, especially when we are losing enrollment. We have to add new value to foreign language education. That's exactly language education to connect, for social contribution, for problem solving. So John Dewey said, if we teach today as we taught yesterday, we rob our children of tomorrow. So we have to come up with new way of teaching. And sometimes we are told having a great knowledge of vocabulary, grammar is important for us. Yes, it's important, but it's more important to have a good teacher, being a teacher. So this way Carl Menninger said, what the teacher is more important than what he teaches. We have to become a model for our students. That is, we should be a 21st century person who can survive 21st century. That's the best way teaching to our students, I think. And in the afternoon, where Professor Park and Nazikian will give you more concrete examples of social networking approach and actually used in this way university, Columbia University. That's more helpful for you. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Time is up, but we have 2 hours lunch break, so I'd like to take a few questions.
Thank you very much for your talk. I just want to know, what would you recommend us that we are from the 20th century? Because we want to teach 21st century skills, but for example, I don't have a lot of those skills. So what can I do, like a boot camp or speed learning, in order to be able to teach that to my students? Do you have any suggestions?
I'm 20th century person too, and I was a really traditional guy, and I was really conservative. Believe it or not, when I came to the United States 40 years ago, I was a Republican supporter. That shows how conservative I was. But I realized I have to change. And again, I said, you have to become a teacher, students model. So you have to develop those 21st century skills. You have to become curious, and you have to be curious enough to learn new things, new skills, and you have to determine to change yourself. And that's all I can say. Yeah. There are many things you can learn, and we can have workshops and so on, and how to implement this way, thing into your classroom. We can discuss. But first thing is determination. Because we are living in a different way, society from 20th century, and in order to survive as a teacher in the 21st century, first we have to make a determination. I will change.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. And I used to teach business Japanese, and I noticed that we really need to teach students to survive this global society, but at the same time, I always felt this frustration that students in my class would go to interview with Japanese companies, but they don't necessarily, the people who interview students, they are like also from 20th century, right? So I think students are more sort of globalized, and they have new ideas. They may have 21st century skill, but the situation waiting for students are not necessarily that.
Yeah, that's true, especially with Japanese companies.
Yeah.
They are still traditional, but if you look at the American companies, as I mentioned, in VUCA World, they realized the world is changing, and so their employee profile must change. Where many American companies, especially large corporations, realize that in order to compete globally. But Japanese companies still they just look at the language abilities, and so we have to, I think, advocate. Society is changing, so people must change. Otherwise, companies cannot compete. We are not necessarily teaching for business people, but again, we need a support from business, and so we should advocate. Company must change, and company must hire different people from last century. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. I was wondering, when you're talking about the education of language now turning to like education through language learning. So it seems like the core has been changing to education. Mostly we are talking about the educational skills and educational goals. So what's the position of language here in this framework? How would social networking approach address specific linguistic elements? Like how does it address the accuracy or kind of things when we teachers actually teaching languages? Mm-hmm. Thank you.
When I wrote education of language, I put language in red. So far, we put a lot of emphasis with that language part rather than education. Education means developing human abilities and so on. And so we emphasized grammar and vocabulary. That's important for us too, but now a new trend of education or education reform is put more emphasis on education, human development, through language education. So as I mentioned, I'm not ignoring vocabulary or grammar. We have to teach vocabulary and grammar. There is no language education without teaching vocabulary and grammar. But there is many ways to teach vocabulary, grammar and vocabulary. There is no one way. So through many different ways, we can develop or help a student develop grammar and vocabulary knowledge. And so I'm saying we should think many different ways. And also, one thing I would like to mention in relation to your questions, if you look at a one-page handout, 3x3+3, from わかる、できる、つながる, there is arrow, right? Please delete those arrows. Yeah, the reason is, if you look at those arrows, two arrows, oh, we will teach first wakaru, and then next dekiru, and finally tsunagaru. I'm saying we need not teach in that order. I always mention or compare this way to swimming. Actually, I cannot swim at this age. I studied really hard how to swim in grade school, and I couldn't swim. And the reason is, when I learn anything, I have to read. I have to read a manual. So when I studied swimming, I bought a book, how to swim book, and read. Move right arm this way, right way, left arm this way. That's wakaru. No. And then I went to my house and put floor. I lie down floor and move, try, simulated. That's what we are doing in classroom, simulation. So, know and do. I couldn't do. And I thought now, or I'm thinking now, the best way to teach my students to swim, take them to, ocean, beach, throw them away, swim. That's tsunagaru. And sometimes start from tsunagaru is better than reading manual, simulating, and not all the time, but sometimes this is the best way to learn foreign language. And so there are many different ways. Even through this way, throw students to ocean, they can study grammar and vocabulary differently from you are giving lecture in the classroom. There are many different ways teaching grammar and vocabulary. There is no one best way to teach grammar and vocabulary. And that way is you have to create way to teach best in your classroom. That's what I said, teaching is not cognitive ability, cognitive activities, ontological activities. Each situation is different. So in this class, this way of grammar teaching is best. But that doesn't apply to other classes or other levels or other days. And I think teacher training for me now is, to develop a student who can think on their own. Actually, this is related to, current trend, I think, where idea thinking, right? Idea thinking, or what is that approach developed by Stanford, idea school. Yeah, well, I won't go into the detail, but teachers who can think on their own, that's really important. Let's do a role plays, let's do a dialogue practice. It's easy, but the best way is determined by situations, by context. And teacher look at the context and decide what is the best way to teach. So I'm not ignoring grammar and vocabulary. We have to teach, but giving a lecture probably is not the effective way to teach, grammar and vocabulary. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Tohsaku sensei. Thank you so much.